Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Darren, and I'll be your host for today's webinar on scaling up how brand licensing can transform your business. First of all, just want to thank all of you for joining us today. We are joined by a panel of experts who will share their insights and experiences. They are renowned experts in their own field with deep understanding of brand licensing landscape. They have worked with numerous global brands and have a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. I'm sure they will give us a better insights on how brand licensing could benefit in our business offerings. Brand licensing is a strategic marketing tool that allows companies to leverage on established brands, trademarks, and IPs to cross-promote and potentially expand their product offerings. In essence, businesses can tap into the equity and recognition of established brands, increasing consumer trust and loyalty. This can lead to accelerated business growth, expanded market reach, and enhanced brand visibility in today's competitive landscape. So, in today's webinar, we'll dive into the world of brand licensing, exploring its opportunities, challenges, and best practices. Let's get ready to gain some valuable knowledge and ask questions and take away actionable strategies to elevate your business. Our first speaker, he has more than 15 years of business development, retail marketing, and licensing brands across multiple industries, such as sports, automotive, fashion, lifestyle, and character entertainment. In his most recent role, he led and managed the full retail and licensing program for the FIBA Basketball World Cup in 2023 in the Southeast Asia region, together with the host nation, Philippines. He currently manages the licensing for top Japanese character entertainment, such as Pokemon, Super Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Edmund Loh. Edmund?
Okay, thank you, Darren, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Edmund from AVEX Asia. Today, I'll be starting off for today's presentation with the topic on brand licensing for the different industries, which I would cover key pointers like how to identify potential partners for brand licensing, conducting the necessary market research and due diligence. After which, I'll also spend a bit of time to walk you through on how brand licensing works across industries, sectors, what are some of their main considerations, and of course, the potential categories that you could explore licensing initiatives. So without further ado, let's start. Now, next slide, please. Now, in terms of identifying licensing opportunities, I think it is very important to say that finding the right partners would be of utmost importance. Now, before even finding the right partner, I think it's key to understand your own brand first, right? You need to have a very thorough understanding of your brand's identity, values, and targeted audience group. Now, the clearer you are about your brand, the easier it is to identify the right brand partners whose profile, product range, platforms, or services that aligns with your brand identity. This would definitely be more market efficient when it comes to any licensing partnerships. Next, competitive analysis. Sorry, back to the previous slide. Competitive analysis is always good to be aware of what your competitors are doing in the market when it comes to licensing developments. Now, you need to understand which are the licensing collaborations that did well, and you could possibly see if there's any areas that you think that, could be improved if you were the one handling the licensing collaboration. Now, this would provide good insights for you to find the right partners. And of course, this will also highlight the brands that may be interested in similar licensing opportunities. Now, point number 3, existing relationships. Now, let's take, for example, there might be already partners that you currently work with that is interested in expanding your current relationship to include licensing arrangements. Let's take, for example, You may be already retailing your own house brands, but could be also distributing for other products from different IPs. This is when you can consider reaching out to them and perhaps start a licensing collaboration. It's always easier to work with people that you're already familiar with or brands that you're fully aware, so that in terms of the collaboration, there's a greater chance for succeeding. Next, you could go for industry events or even trade shows, like the upcoming FLAsia from 12th of September to 14th of September, where I think you'll meet a lot of potential partners that, those IPs will be showcasing their offerings, and this will also provide you with opportunities to look out for partners which are actively seeking licensing collaborations. So you need to be able to network, leverage on the industry contacts, the professional networks that they have. And of course, you could use like maybe even social media platforms like, LinkedIn to identify the right partners. Last but not least, now, in terms of licensing agencies, right? If all else fails, there's always licensing agencies or brand owners that you could approach for help in this area. Now, for myself, I come from a licensing agency, even from Ricky, he comes from the Future Playground. And of course, we have Anjan later who will be speaking, that's from Paramount. So, I believe, going for the licensing agencies or speaking to the brand owners, that will actually help you to identify the right partners that you could potentially look at and support you in terms of your licensing journey. Now, in terms of market research and due diligence, this is a very important part when it comes to identifying licensing opportunities as well. Now, we need to have very clear market analysis, right? Conduct the right research so that you understand the industry trends. What is moving at the moment? What are people buying, right? Their consumer preference and the potential demand for your licensed products, right? This will help you to identify the lucrative sectors that you could consider for licensing. Next, we have partner assessment, right? Partner assessment, of course, you need to then evaluate your potential brand partners' market position, their financial stability, their reputation, perhaps retail and distribution capabilities. So, all this would help you to understand what it entails when you decide to go into a partnership with all these brand licensing partners, right? Then we have legal and compliance review. Now, this area, I think, is key, especially for territories that you are intending to conduct your licensing partnerships, right? You have to make sure that, these territories perhaps have the right intellectual property laws, right? The regulatory requirements and the frameworks that would help protect the licensed brand and eventually your partnership. It's good to conduct background checks as well to assess the brand partners, licensing practices, whether they have any previous licensing deals and any potential red flags. This will actually reduce any risk of future conflicts and licensing failures. Of course, bearing in mind, as much as you are conducting background checks on them, they would be conducting background checks on you as well. So this works hand in hand. Now, last but not least, financial analysis. I think it's always good to know the current positioning of your brand partners, whether they have the right level of resources to continuously grow their brand into different markets, embark onto new product ranges, platforms, so you can ensure the longevity of this partnership. Next, I'm going to move into talking about more on licensing in the different industries. I'll be covering the different industries, the categories that you could look at, and some of the considerations that you might already have. Let's start with food and beverage. Now, food and beverage is always talking about, launching of new SKUs, new product lines, new flavors, or perhaps you're even considering like thematic cafes. Licensing could actually help you to spearhead this. So categories, of course, like I mentioned, theme cafes, dairy, drinks, candies, chocolate biscuits. These are I would say categories that, have done licensing before in the market. And, most of them are successfully done with a lot of high revenue gains in the end, right? So when you look at licensing for F&B, of course, you need to find a right balance. Now, licensing of F&B, of course, you can depend on the character IP to break the market for you. But at the same time, in order to ensure longevity, of course, your products has to be viable for the market, right? In terms of taste, in terms of how it looks, that would really eventually determine the success or failure. Now, the examples that you could look at, of course, the Pokemon Oreo collaboration, and of course, the Super Mario and Irvin's salty egg snacks. Next, we move on to fashion and lifestyle. Now, fashion and lifestyle industry, the brand image and market positioning is very critical, right? Preferably, licensing partners should have strong design capabilities, manufacturing expertise, and of course, a matured distribution network. The fashion industry these days, I think there's also very strict quality control to ensure and maintain brand integrity. And future trends look at sustainability, which a lot of fashion apparel companies are now focusing on that. So when you're looking at categories like apparel, footwear, bags, jewelry, or even accessories, you could take reference from the examples that are given, like the Pokemon collaboration with Beyond the Vines, or even the Pokemon SK Jewelry collection. Next, we move into health and beauty. That will include vitamins, skincare, perhaps oral hygiene and cosmetics. Again, for the health and beauty sector, right? This sector focus a lot of expanding the brand presence into different markets, different segments. So partners preferably again should have experience in the relevant product category. Then of course a strong distribution channel and a good track record of successful brand extensions. So again, you can refer to the ones that that's been done in the market, but between Pokemon and Band-Aid and Pokemon and Zenium for the electric toothbrush. Next, we move on to retail and leisure. Another very interesting industry. Now, the retail and leisure, now, because if you're talking about retail or consumer goods, extremely wide categories, low barriers of entry, which also means high competition amongst the subcategories. Now, typically when it comes to licensing, I think you could look at using, or you could consider all the audience demographics, the media platforms that these partners are using, and generally you could also take into consideration your own customer segments before embarking onto a licensing partnership. So again, this covers shopping malls, hypermarkets, supermarkets, CVS, and of course location-based entertainment. You could refer to the Pokemon collaboration with the Mount Faber Leisure Group. That's for the cable cars. And of course, our recent project back in end 2023, that's the Nintendo Jewel Changi Airport collaboration. Last but not least, we move into technology, which is huge in today's market. This normally involves, perhaps, innovations, new hardware design. So, it's important to ensure that any licensing collaboration, should maintain or even enhance the technology that's in place, right? So it's not just about putting a brand out there. It's to make sure that both the brand partners and yourself are aligned on the end objectives and goals. So, the technology, sometimes they use it to refresh their brands or refresh their products, or especially for new launches. Now, you could consider looking at, the Pokemon Samsung collaboration for earbuds, or the Pokemon Razer collaboration as reference points. Yes, with that, I end my part of the presentation. So next, I think, my good friend Anjan, a veteran in the licensing industry, would be able to share with you a lot more on the nuts and bolts of licensing.
Yeah,
Anjan, please.
Thank you so much, Agnan. Thank you very much. I'm sure I myself am a Pokemon fan as well. Right. Yeah, so thanks for introducing the next speaker on the topics that were discussed on the key components of a licensing agreement and financial implications of licensing. I think like what most of us term it as nuts and bolts. The common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So our next speaker, Mr. Anjan, he is a consumer product licensing professional whose experience spans more than 25 years across Southeast Asia and India and Middle East. Wow. He currently works for Paramount Global, whose brands, among many other, includes Paw Patrol, SpongeBob, Garfield, and popular series like Emily in Paris. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Anjan.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Constellar and FLA for this opportunity. And Edmund, massive congrats on all the good work Pokemon is doing in the market. I think that's something. It's a trailblazer for a lot of licensing companies in Southeast Asia. Good job. Right, Sherlyn, can you have this first slide, please? So, as the title suggests, I'll basically Yes, as the title suggests, I'll talk briefly about some nuts and bolts of licensing. Some of it may be a repeat of what Edmund has mentioned, but I'll try to keep it a different perspective in my talk. Right, and since time is a constraint, I'll possibly be happy to answer any clarifications in the Q&A later if required. Yes, so what makes up a licensing agreement? I'll talk about three parts. There could be many more parts, but I just try to have picked up the three important parts of licensing. Character and brand licensing, as we know, right? We'll talk about some key components of the agreement. We'll talk about what goes a bit deeper into financial considerations, apart from what Edmund has already briefed us on. And then lastly, but not the least, as Darren says, 25 years in this industry has brought out three pitfalls, which I will make up and try to explain to you in a nutshell at the end of this 10-minute talk. Next slide, please. So on the component license, the three pillars, which I would say is a grant of rights, financial terms, and operational issues, right? So grant of rights, as Edward was saying, we need to be clear, what are we licensing, right? That's something which I think a lot of licensing potential partners do not do a proper homework on. What trademark, what copyright, what goes in that IP that you're licensing, what are you taking? So I would strongly suggest and urge anybody entering licensing to really get into details about the copyright trademark issues of a licensing program, right? You need to understand what you are going to take on rent, right? So that is something important. And in the common language, if you put it, what is the franchise? What are you signing up for? It's necessary. You need to understand its suitability, like as Edmund mentioned. Is it good for your market? Many times we get in my experience across 2.5, 3 decades now across multiple territories, potential partners just get attracted by the name Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, Paramount, Pokemon, but little knowing that their market may not be yet ready to pay that price of premium, or whether that brand is well known among the masses in that region. So one needs to understand that when you're taking IP, you need to understand what is it for the market. And of course, your own capability, as I was mentioning, it is a hard job taking on a license from a global partners. Right. So again, just to give an example over here, something very recent on point number one, Emily in Paris and Mission Impossible, both are which Paramount brands. We do license these two properties, but making use of Lily Collins or Tom Cruise is next to impossible. So that we make it very clear to all licensees that yes, you are being licensed for Emily in Paris or Mission Impossible, but do not come to us making use of Tom Cruise face on your t-shirt. It is not really going to work. He is very adamant on not using his face on any product. Tom Cruise just feels that his name sells, which is true. Right. So again, to the example of what you may be taking the entire rights, and the licensee may come up, worried that I can use Lily Collins' face, but you can't. Okay, so that's on point number one of grant rights. Second is again more the basic stuff. What territories are you going to license for? It should be made clear. We can't put broad generic terms like Southeast Asia. It involves 8 to 10 countries. Some countries have got bans from respective governments. You can't do business with some countries. So be careful of what territories you're licensed for. Duration again, time from and to. This is something important, which this often gets into bit disputes because licensees sign up quickly on 1st of January, but then it takes 6 months to get the product out, then come back crying, saying that, oh, can you do extension to us? So that may happen. Also from licensor side, there could be delays. The movie may get pushed back. There could be a writer's strike. There could be sometimes style guys don't come on time, things like that. So duration of is important and that should be made clear. So the product development time has to be built into the license term. Normally, 3 to 6 months is good enough to have enough time for the licensee to start producing and selling in the market. Channels important. Channels need to be specified in today's world. Channels are getting a bit tied up all the place. You need to understand cross-border commerce, which is getting to be a big issue nowadays in today's world. And then you need to understand where does offline, online means, can you sell outside your territory? Can you not sell outside territory? All these factors need to be put into account. Whether you're doing through a marketplace or whether through your own website, all these factors come in channel discussions when you're talking to a licensor. And of course, last but not the least, product categories. In today's world, you can license almost anything and everything, right? So one needs to be careful on the product categories you're licensing. The licensee should ask questions to licensor. How many people are there in this category? How many people are doing this type of product, at which price point, which channel? So these things are important just to make sure that the license discussions go off well. Point number 2 on a financial terms, again, as Edmund was mentioning, this is something where, it's really black and white, but again, this is where maximum disputes also happen. In terms of licensing generally works on concept of advance payment, right? So licensee needs to pay an advance fee after which the licensor will start accruing the royalty sales and sort of work on the advance payment. So what happens for the licensee is the cash flow, right? The cash flow is important. You are basically paying in advance to the licensor for projected sales in the next quarter or next year. So that is something which I think a potential partner must really do the homework well, right? There are a couple of ways of this is how it's done. One is called the minimum guarantee concept, where it's basically a fee to be paid in advance, irrespective of sales achieved or not in a particular time. Or you could also do a flat fee structure, a flat fee where you pay for a particular limited run of production. Again, there are various means of doing commercial terms nowadays, but these two are possibly the most commonly used terms for the advances and the fee structure. Royalties percentage, that's again an important part of the maths. I think sometimes a difference of 0.5% make a difference between profit and loss for a particular brand. I think I always been a licensor side, but we would always be very transparent and possibly ask licensee to do a due diligence on how does advance and royalty percentage work on their P&L. That's important. I think a lot of licensees sometimes feel, oh, 5 to 5.5, not a big difference. I'll make up the difference. But the 0.5 sometimes in some categories can make a difference between profit and loss. So that's something which, for this audience and for this potential partners, I would seriously encourage that it should be properly borne in mind. Royalties can work on a couple of bases. One is retail price, that is the percentage you pay on the price, the sticker price in the shop. Most often used for DTR partners, direct to retail partners. The most commonly based base is the net invoice billing. That is the royalty percentage you pay when you send it to a distributor or to a trade. And then, of course, you've got FOB, which is basically imports. So there are a couple of ways, again, on which royalties can be counted. Last but not the least, royalty reporting and processes are, again, this is operations, but again, very important, right? To keep a good paper trail documentation is also very important. One needs to understand both sides, licensor and licensee, that proper documentation, paperwork on royalty reporting, things like that would reduce the risk of conflict as you go along, right? The second point which I want to bring over here is contract currency. Most big partners, the most commonly used term is US dollars. But again, given today's volatile world, one needs to be careful. So this again has to play a role when you decide to take on a license. So if I can summarize, one is advances, second is royalty percentage, and lastly, but not the least, in today's world, the contract currency is coming into play. If I'm not giving any secrets, but 25 years back, one of the companies I was working for was all in US dollars. And when the ASEAN financial crisis hit this region, that whole maths went out of shape, right? Overnight, their deliverables on the same contract went up by 40-50%. Ricky would know which country I'm talking about. Right? So then after that time, a lot of big partners have started going into local currency contracts. So that's something which has to be borne in mind. The contract currency is something which is important to note. Last but not least on this slide is operational issues. Most licensors have a detailed software system nowadays for product and marketing collateral approvals. One needs to really keep in mind that the licensee who is entering the business for the first time should really understand the process. Will it require new talent? Will it require new software? Will it require people who can understand how a licensor wants the forms to be filled up? These are again important issues and nuts and bolts of licensing before you sort of sign on the dotted line. And then last but again, as Edmund was mentioning, there are a lot of statutory legal taxation issues in licensing with tax, this tax, that tax. You've got to be careful on all those factors. You need to get some professional advice on how will you manage the payment and taxation issues on a license. So these are the sort of few top of mind nuts and bolts of a license before one signs the dotted line. Next slide, please, Shalin. Yes, now looking, this headline is called financial considerations. But what I want to emphasize over here, as Edmund was mentioning, is to do a rigorous analysis of the IP and the P&L. We need licensees today need to project their sales sometime in the future. There's no point thinking that today I'm doing well, so I'll keep on doing well. The world is changing too fast. The channels are changing rapidly. And most important, consumer attitudes and demands are changing, right? So one needs to look at nowadays a projected P&L into the future, 2-3 years, and what will happen if this happens, what happens if that happens. And I'm signing an advance based on what is the current scenario. So one needs to do that slightly better. Okay, then looking at things like additional resources, you need to understand where you would have find more people to really get into your business and things like that. Full cost awareness, again, I mentioned advances, as I mentioned, tooling and quality control manufacturing. This is a lot of licensors need high quality products. Is your ecosystem ready to take on the additional cost of tooling and getting in more expensive input cost to create a better product, right? Marketing fund, you need to co-fund marketing activities with the licensor. So one needs to be careful on that to build the cost in. And then of course, some licensors have got factory audits and last but not the least is exit cost. You can't just get out of a license that easily. So you need to understand that there could be an exit cost for removing a license out. Okay, then opportunity cost again is felt self-explanatory. One is to just bear in mind that there could be potential benefits of choosing a license over other IPs. So one is to also bear in mind on when you do the financial protection of a license, what happens. Yeah, next slide, please. My famous slide. It's quite apparent. A license is not an ATM card, my dear friends. You can't take a license and hope to get money coming from next month. It doesn't happen that way. In my 25 years experience, I hardly seen this thing happening. So it requires time, patience, discipline, right? I won't talk much on that, but it's not an ATM card. Second point, please bear in mind, a license is not ownership. It's a rented property. What I mean by this is that you need to understand that you are always taking something which is open to vagaries of the future. The licensor may change, the licensor might get sold, the licensor management might change, things like that. So you need to understand that when you take on a commitment, you're not buying a IP, you're just taking it on rent for whatever, 2, 3, 5, 10 years you're working on. And last but not the least, I would suggest strongly. I used to tell all my licensees, don't put everything in one basket. Have some IPs which go across categories, across demographics. That will just reduce the risk of getting into licensing business. So that's it from my end. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you
Shirley.
so much, Anjan. Yeah, I think in all most businesses, it's not advisable to put everything in the same basket, yeah? Right. So in our next topic, we'll be discussing about developing a licensing strategy, aligning licensing with business goals, and enhancing brands' equity and visibility through case studies. Our next speaker is a veteran in children's toys and products. He has experience in the licensing industry in Southeast Asia for over 30 years. His experience in the brand licensing space is wide and varied. He runs a licensing agency for over 15 years, representing brands such as Barbie, Hot Wheels, Thomas and Friends, Pokemon, Garfield, and among many others. He works and guides licensees in a host of consumer categories such as stationeries, F&B, personal care, apparels, and even a kid's saving account with a bank. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ricky Naruta.
Thank you, Darren. And thank you, Anjan and Edmund, for sharing some very valuable, I should say invaluable insights from all your years of experience in licensing. Thank you, first of all, FLA and Constella for organizing this webinar. I think it's important to demystify brand licensing and expand the outreach to more companies in Singapore and the region to understand licensing as a business strategy. Brand licensing is an all of business endeavor, and it is with a medium to long-term horizon. As you start thinking about brand licensing, hopefully with this webinar today and at the event that's coming on ground in FLA Fair, consider multiple aspects. First of all, obviously, it's a product or service that you wish to offer. Pricing, how much can you realistically charge for that? Distribution, marketing, your competition, consumer trends, and of course, as what Anjan was just describing, financial forecasting and cash flow. Brand licensing is not a short-term endeavor. It is not a quick fix to falling sales. So it's something that you need to consider as a business strategy. Next, please. Okay, so to begin, I think one slide before, yeah, this one, great. So to begin, we always like to ask this question, why? Why brand licensing over other strategies that you could be doing? So what do you want to achieve from licensing somebody else's brand? Or as what Anjan just said, renting a brand. What is your time frame? What else have you considered that made you realize that brand licensing could be perhaps more beneficial for your company? So because like everything else, walking down this path is going to require commitment of time, money, people, and other resources. So the first reason is obvious, brand licensing, for revenue growth. Everybody wants more sales. With brand licensing, we've seen many examples of sorry, it's the right slide from the audience. I'm just going through without reading it point by point, so just bear with me. So there are many examples of very successful licensing programs that you've obviously seen around you, and just as many that didn't go as well as planned. And we need to dig a bit deeper into thinking about the strategy when you start thinking about licensing. So brand licensing can provide a big advantage for expanding your brand in many ways. So for example, by using an IP's existing style guide and imagery and creative assets, we can develop an entirely new product line for ourselves much faster, create new variants, create new products. So that speed to market is an advantage. We can reposition the brand. So for example, if you have a brand that's been around for the last 50 years, and you want to reposition it as a cool brand, or it's suitable for today's young audience or young consumers, then you can look at a license to attach to your brand and then make it look hip and happening. So for example, you've seen like Pokemon and Oreo cookies, an unlikely combination, but suddenly, all the fans of Pokemon start having Oreo cookies because it's suddenly very cool. Or sometimes you'll see, certain athletes, with certain sporting brands. So you may encounter, competition from existing brands when you are, in the marketplace, getting new shelf space or getting more retail channels to open up, and then you try to penetrate by offering new products, and you always get, hit by a wall, because the incumbents are very strong. So what you can consider is maybe, look at a license in terms of what's popular with your audience, what's popular with your channel partners' audience, and then by acquiring that license with your brand, you may suddenly find that instead of you pushing the retailer or the channel partner to buy your product because you're pushing, suddenly there's demand from the consumer, and then they open the door and give you space, like magic. So that that is the perfect blend of the right license and right IP. So when done right, it gives you a competitive edge. And then with that edge, you get sales, and then with that sales, you get bigger market share, and then the virtuous cycle continues. So this is ultimately what we are all hoping to gain from brand licensing. Now, the big question, and the next slide, is how do you choose the right brand? So firstly, to dispel any rumors or misconception, brand licensing has never been easier. There are more IPs available worldwide than ever in history, and licensing has become something that's common and accepted practice. So it's not difficult at all to get into licensing. It's how you do it that's important. But the big challenge today is, how do I choose the right IP, or how do I choose the right brand? What do I need to consider? So first of all, there are licenses available out there for movies, for animation, for music, food, gaming, sports, celebrity, influencers, books, museums, all kinds of different IP. And they're all out there. If you search hard enough, you'll find something that would and should work with your brand. But before you even look outside, look internally, look inside. What are you offering? What is your product? What is your service? Who's your target audience? What do they care about? What's important to your audience, and where the synergy makes sense? And then after that, how can you impact, and what is your goal, as what we discussed earlier. So a license is going to cost money. There's no choice. But so choose a brand that can give you that edge, can give you that advantage that is more than what you're going to pay. And if you're going to pay royalty, so be it, but you're going to gain a lot more than what you're paying. Ultimately, the whole ecosystem, supports and builds itself. So remember, when you choose a brand, I always tell everyone, remember that there is a lead time between the time that you decide to take a brand as a license and the time when your product is going to be on the shelf. So if it's really quick and you have a supplier in another country who's already developed and selling the product that with the license, and you want to just pick it up and bring it in to Singapore, that's easy. That will still take you about a few months, maybe 6 months from start to finish. If you're going to do it from scratch, design, develop, and everything else, easily 12 to 18 months. So in that kind of time frame, what you're seeing today that's popular, in the media or online, in the social media, etc., it may not be popular anymore in 12 to 18 months time. So think forward, do some research, and if it's hot now, there's no certainty that it's going to be hot in 6 to 12 months. So maybe if you miss this trend, never mind. Look forward, look ahead. Maybe there's something else bigger that's coming up. Okay, next, please. Now, after you've looked at what you need to build your own brand, and look at what's available in the terms of the brands that you think would match your brand. So now look at your potential candidates. Look at the IP. Try to understand what is their identity. And you can research online, and we're talking to the brand representative to understand how do they typically apply the license? Who are their existing partners around the world? What kind of products have they produced? So you have an idea of where they sit, who is their audience, and does that match with what you assume, what you thought would be? And then if it fits and if it's consistent, and it allows you to pivot your brand, forward in a way that makes sense for the next few years, then that's a good investment. That could be a good brand for you to look at. Next, please. Now, how do you do market research? It's always talked about. You got to do market research, do your due diligence. So there are some tools available. There are some agencies, including Future Playground, that can support um, uh, companies seeking to go out and get a license. We are brand agnostic, so we are happy to work with anyone and any client with any license, so to provide that linkage, to do the research for you, to provide you with guidance, to tell you where to look for the research, and then find the correct product and brand fit. How well will your brand fit with this IP? Has it been done before? Is it something very disruptive? If it's disruptive, will the retailers accept it? Will the consumer accept your brand, being associated with this IP, and so on? Sometimes a risk can result in something very, very amazing, and sometimes it just doesn't work. Are you willing to take that kind of risk? Look at speed to market. How fast do you need to be out there? How fast, how long is your product cycle? How long is your product relevant on the shelf? For example, if you had signed up an Olympic license for Paris 2024, it would have done extremely well leading up to the Olympics and through the Olympics, because everybody is talking about the Olympics and the hype is strong and everyone's crazy about it at the moment. But the moment the Olympic Games ended, after that, it fizzles out. The audience, the consumer is looking to the next sporting event or the next big thing that's going to happen. Maybe it's the F1 or maybe 2026 World Cup or 2028, the next Olympic Games. So look at your product. And if you didn't manage to sell your product during the Paris Olympics, what are you going to do with your inventory now? That's a big question. So look at how long you need to develop the product, how long it takes to get it approved, what's the MOQ, what's the channel, and make those decisions prior to deciding. Next, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Yeah. So one slide before, if you don't mind. The one that says develop. Yeah. So when you want to win the consumer, it comes down to product. A license can take you that far, open doors, put you on the shelf, get the audience to pay attention, but ultimately it's your product. So create product, innovate, design, make it outstanding, and never forget that's what consumers are ultimately buying. Avoid sticker slapping. What I mean by sticker slapping is just taking an existing product, just changing the label and say now it's licensed. Consumers are very smart. They will realize that it's the same water bottle with a different plastic wrapper. They will not know, they won't buy into it because it's a license. And all brand owners today expect the highest quality and highest standards. Whether it's local or foreign, it's demanded because consumers demand it, and there's a big price to pay if you don't meet consumer expectations. Next, please. Why are you taking a license? Back to that question. You want to take a license because by renting or by paying the royalty for this IP, you will be able to leverage on the power of this brand. This brand that you have decided to pick up as a license is popular, has a consumer base, has a fan following, has loyalty, has recognition. When you take a license for this brand and you decide to develop product, your whole company is working towards creating something that's new and innovative and marvelous for consumers. You have to know, or you have to take advantage or have leverage on this IP, on the power of this brand, to move your brand forward, to propel your own sales, to get you new channels, to get you new customers, and to be able to recover the royalties that you paid, and not only recover the royalty that you paid, but also bring tangible and intangible financial benefit to your company. And that is where ultimately the success or failure of a licensing program lies. So leveraging on the brand is important. Looking at how the brand has been exercising their marketing, how active they are in terms of promoting their brand is a key part of making a selection and the strategy. Next, please. Lastly, I would say you must ensure compliance with brand guidelines. This is a subject that becomes very contentious sometimes between brand owner and licensing partner, where sometimes a brand may want to take some shortcuts in terms of design liberties and execution on quality, on product. But at the end of the day, you are renting someone's brand, and you are responsible for making sure that you comply with the brand guidelines. And if these guidelines are too strict, or you're unable to meet those guidelines, then certainly it warrants a reflection on whether this is the right brand for your product or your company. As I said at the beginning, there are many brands out there, tons of new IP being launched, sometimes even on a daily basis, that we encounter wonderful ideas that are coming up in all areas. So if there's any interest to go further down this line, I certainly recommend and encourage you to explore, to look deeper into this, to come for the events organized by FLA that are coming soon. But more importantly, do feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about licensing, or you wish to go a bit deeper into this topic, and maybe we have not been able to cover today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ricky, and thank you, all speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to open questions from the floor. So if you do have any question, just feel free to type that in, and our speakers here will be able to take them on. So in fact, I do have got some questions, if you don't mind. So my question is this: assuming I have identified brand licensing as an opportunity, I have kind of selected which IP I want to go for, and of course, Anjan, I have also figured out the licensing agreement portion. Now, do we have any measure of success of a brand licensing partnership? Sorry, I think you're muted, Anjan.
I'll just take a first shot at it. I mean, success is sales. Let's be clear that if you hit your numbers, hit the deal you're signed up for, that's one success point of view, right? You show more than guarantees, you're successful. The sales happens. If brand equity of your company goes up in the marketplace because of XYZ license, I think you're achieved one more intangible benefit. People talk about you, people come to you, other IP owners come to you. It's important. Third is, if you get penetrate new markets riding on the IP, that's another success factor. So there can be a couple of metrics I can think of as of now. I mean, maybe Edmund and Ricky can add more to it.
Thanks. Anyone want to chime in further on that?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's sales, and performance, in financial performance is usually the gauge for most companies looking at licensing. Sometimes you can have some intangible goals as well, like repositioning your brand to a new market, reviving a brand that's been maybe lagging for a long time, and you want to bring it back into the forefront. Reputation. Sometimes if a company is been overtaken by younger or newer brands that suddenly you find yourself falling behind, you need to reinvigorate the business by getting a license. That can be an intangible gain. Of course, it all comes back to financial results, and if that hits the investment in license, first of all, paying for the license, and second of all, the inventory and the product development costs and so on, if you can recoup all of that and make profit, then of course it's a very successful program. So it's always a medium to long term view in our mind, as opposed to a short term fix.
Thank you. Edmund, you have anything to add? Otherwise, we can go on to the next question.
I think, totally agree with the other two speakers that, effectively there's a lot of financial considerations, right? But at the end of the day, if you have a licensing objective that you hope to achieve, whether it comes to breaking new markets, expanding your retail and distribution channels with a licensing collaboration, so sometimes this kind of intangible benefits, right, sometimes will outweigh the financial ones. So, it really depends I think like what Ricky mentioned, if it's going to be a long-term strategy in play, of course, when you are viewing in terms of your financial considerations, you have to make sure that the numbers work for you to be able to sustain until that growth. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we have some question on the floor right now. There's one question I think is directed for you, Edmund. So in your slide, you cited about smart technology for licensing for consumers, right? Have you come across any license for smart farming technology?
Okay, I think smart farming definitely very niche.
Yeah.
I haven't come across that as yet, but I think definitely if I'm assuming that the person who's asking this question is interested in this area. So if you are looking at smart farming, and you probably would be among the first in the market, I would say. So having that first mover advantage does help when it comes to licensing. Yeah.
Yeah, before all the clutter comes in. Also from the same person from the audience, Mr. Chin, he's also asking, what are the prerequisites to become a licensor? I think this question is probably directed more for Ricky.
To become a licensor?
Yeah.
That's a very good question, and we've helped companies to become licensors in the past. So it is definitely a nice goal to have, and a very realistic goal. It requires again a step-by-step analysis of what you ultimately wish to achieve, what the assets are available currently for the brand awareness, and the size of the breadth of the brand at the moment. But you can we do encourage companies to look at how they can monetize their trademarks, their intellectual property, and become licensors themselves. And that requires some investment to get to that point, starting line. And then again, from that point, once you have established a baseline of creative assets and all the different materials you need to go out there in the world as a licensor, then you need to pitch to potential partners, as what all three of us have been doing, a good part of the last 2-3 decades. But certainly, we do encourage that sort of thinking, because I believe that there's a lot of good and established brands in Singapore and the region that may not have taken this step of monetizing their brands. Happy to have this conversation offline after this. Yeah, it's a big topic.
It is. I mean, being a licensor, right? A lot of consideration, and I think it's not just an overnight thing as well.
Yeah.
Right. Next question we have, she's asking about the considerations for exit clause. What is the market practice, or is there any examples that we could share on that?
From a licensor point of view, honestly, the exit clause do exist for certain abnormal force majeure type of things, where the earth collapses or the sea comes across the entire country and things like that. There are clauses kept in any standard agreement. But honestly, it is like I mentioned in my talk, it is not easy to exit. It's like if I give you an example, you end up ordering stuff in a restaurant, you got to pay the bill, right? You can't not pay the bill if you don't like the char kway teow, or for example, you are taking a house on rent in Singapore. There's what is called diplomatic clause, right? Just because you don't like the house, you can't move out. You're going to pay the remaining rent for that diplomatic clause. So there is a certain fee to be paid. So exit is not an easy task in any licensing agreement, unless you end up paying the entire money is due to the licensor. That's possible. That's possible. That has been done in the past. But again, you understand one thing, that it's not again an easy discussion to have between a licensee and licensor. But again, no easy answers. There are exit clauses for big issues, but for normal, just because you change your mind or you lost your marketing manager, you can't exit a license.
If I can add to that, If I can add to that, I think just to clarify, I think that exit clause is in reference to early termination of
That
an
is
agreement.
that could be different. Termination is different. Termination can
Yeah,
happen. The
both ways, right?
licensor can terminate a licensee. A licensee cannot terminate licensor, right? I'm
Correct.
assuming we all know that. You can't. I own
Correct.
the IP, so I can terminate licensee, but a licensee can't terminate a licensor.
Correct, correct. But if
That
a
is not
licensee
really.
decides to say that I give up and I want to
Yeah,
stop
that is
doing
not.
this,
It's
then
not
they
a
have to fulfill all the financial
correct.
obligations and everything else. But if the term of the contract, let's say it's a 2-year, 3-year agreement, and you fulfill all the obligations,
can,
and
yeah,
it's end of 3 months, 3 years, you say I don't want to continue, I've
correct,
had
correct.
enough. That's fine. Then
Yeah.
there's nothing to worry about in terms of exit
Normally
clause,
for
because
this,
that is an
you know,
automatic ending.
correct, correct. I mean, you normally start talking with the licensor 6 months in advance in case you have plans to exit. Then so there is enough time given out to sell off the stocks. You know, don't do any new production. Licensor has time to also clean the market, things like that. So yeah, there are two ways of looking at exit in a way. Yeah, one is yeah.
Edmund, would you like to give your thoughts on that as well, on exit clauses?
I mean, I agree, you know, it really depends on where you're looking at it from, right? The licensor's point of view or the licensee's point of view. I mean, to the licensee, there's really not much that you can do in terms of, you know, coming up with a reason or, you know, putting in a clause for you to exit from the licensing agreement. On the licensor's end, of course, they have greater flexibility in terms of this. So I think, you know, before you enter any licensing agreement, I think, you know, of course, you must be prepared that such a scenario might occur whereby you need to end the agreement. I think, you know, just adding that, you know, most licensors, they would be able to understand if there's really a true reason that you need to stop licensing from the IP. So, you know, usually for such cases, we will actually settle out from the contract, right? There could be, you know, certain financial obligations, like I think what Anjan mentioned, that needs to be fulfilled. So, you know, it really depends on the negotiation.
Right. So it's a lot of consideration on this aspect. I think the question itself, if you could provide more context, I think that would be easier for us to take it on. I think with this, once again, we are running towards the end. I think we're running kind of run out of time right now. And if we are unable to take your question, we apologize for that. But we will try to reach out to you in some way or another. One alternative is, of course, the speakers has also been sharing the main event happening next month, the Franchising and Licensing Asia, that will be happening at Marina Bay Sands Convention Center from 12th to 14th September. Right. So, of course, apart from franchising, which is also part of licensing, we will be further deep diving into discussion on the power of brand licensing and how strategic collaborations can help scale businesses. There will be a couple of conference sessions covering this topic, and I believe Edmund and Anjan, and we hope Ricky could be there as well. They'll be speaking. We will also have got representative from the other licensing space, such as XM Studio, IP Office of Singapore will be there. Disney will also be there speaking. So join us at the event. And also we will have an array of brand IPs on the exhibition show floor as well. So on the screen here, don't forget to register for the upcoming event, Franchising and Licensing Asia, to learn more about the latest trends and opportunities in the industry. The QR code, you could just scan it to register for your interest. And thank you so much, everyone. So as you leave, we actually has got a survey questions that were popped up. We will appreciate some time on your feedback for the survey form, and we would like to hear from you on future topics that you'll be keen in, as well as to give us a better understanding on where you are with your businesses in terms of brand licensing, right? That's quite a mouthful. Right, so thank you again, once again, and we hope to see you in September at MBS. Thank you.